Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. And today is a show I have been called upon to host solo. So I thought about what's a good topic to cover today. And, last week was what we called Peak Off Week. We celebrated the birthday of our favorite living philosopher on the show and probably on the channel, Leonard Peikoff. His birthday was Friday, and all week we interviewed various people who had a lot to say about Leonard Peikoff, his work, him as a person, and it obviously raised a lot of sort of issues to think about. Then on Friday, we were fortunate to have Dr. Peikoff on the show, and a lot of you have seen that episode and were very generous with your compliments towards him in the chat and the super chat and all of that. And something that I find interesting about Leonard Peikoff is ever since he retired, something like 8 or 9 years ago, he does not want to talk philosophy. Anytime, on the rare occasions where he makes an appearance, you mustn't ask him about philosophy, which is obviously the thing that we all affiliate with him. So he appeared 2014 to play some music that he's gotten into, that he's written. And he appeared to do the Viennese operetta lecture. And then, of course, he came and celebrated his birthday with us. And it was kind of presumed, I think, like he's here to answer questions about his life, his questions about himself as a person. He doesn't want to talk philosophy, which is very interesting to me. So, and I've heard also from people that have spent time around him in person, let's say someone giving him a ride somewhere or someone getting dinner with him, whatever it is, someone who's working with him in some capacity. Typically, it's best not to bring up philosophy to him. He takes the retired philosopher very seriously, it seems. Isn't that kind of interesting? Like what is there to discuss when you know somebody for his work? And that's kind of something you've always wanted to talk to him about. Like, imagine if Ayn Rand didn't want to talk philosophy when Leonard Peikoff met her. Wouldn't that be kind of like awkward? Like, okay, so what do we talk about? But I think from Leonard Peikoff's perspective, from what I can tell, he's kind of he's looking maybe to connect with people on something other than philosophy. He seems to like talking about his life, talk about his interests and stuff like that. And on the other side of this intercourse, what do we want to tell him? We can't wait. And you saw this in the very lovely super chats that a lot of you sent over on Friday to the show. Thank you, Dr. Peikoff. You are a god among men. It's kind of an interesting dynamic, isn't it? And then after the show ended, a few of us were fortunate to be on the Zoom call that he was on for a few minutes longer. And there too, people were like, thank you for being here. Thank you for your work. And the vibe he was giving off was just kind of like, all right, I get it. Like, you're all very thankful, but like, let's talk about such and such, Chipotle. He began eating there again because they have carnitas again. He had been boycotting them because they stopped serving carnitas. Isn't that kind of interesting? I guess there's different reasons, I guess, he would not want to talk philosophy, if I had to guess. One of them being that focusing on the abstract for so long is almost like dehumanizing in a way. Maybe when like that's all anyone wants to talk to you about. Another respect, I suppose, and people that are in entertainment or in any way a public figure are kind of sensitive to this type of thing, where you meet people that are like fans or in some way paying attention to you from afar, and you kind of feel weird by the way like they're treating you, and you're just kind of like going through life looking for people you can be friends with or just people you could connect with in some way. And that kind of admiration it's kind of weird. It's not really it definitely doesn't make for a great birthday party, I guess. And paradoxically, when people try to play it very nonchalant and even sort of neg a little bit, NEG, like negative, this is kind of a tactic people use to like may like insult you a little bit or kind of put you down and kind of express like, oh, you're not so hot. That's pretty transparent as well. So I don't really know the solution to this dilemma when you are sort of infatuated with somebody, whether it's your hero or whether it's a girl. And I think girls probably, a lot of them probably go through similar things as I'm saying entertainers and public figures go through, where they're being kind of admired from afar and people treat them in a way that's where they're not entirely trying to get to know them as a person, but there's something they're trying to get. And that makes them uncomfortable. So I think what all of us want all of the time is a kind of a genuine connection with people. And the feeling I got from Leonard Peikoff when we were preparing to end the Zoom call after the episode is that he probably would have stayed on longer. Like he was kind of like, should I stay on longer? Like, did something you guys wanted to do? I could sense if a good conversation topic had come up, that Zoom call could have gone on for hours. But I think so many of us sort of treated it like, oh, it's such an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for making the time for this. And that doesn't make for a great sort of platonic connection to, pardon the phrase platonic. That's not friendship, is it? So that kind of that got me thinking a lot about the sort of the dynamic between sort of a public figure and audience members. And like I said, I don't really know the solution to this when there's sort of infatuation on one side of this relationship. I don't know what the solution is. And I've been reading Nietzsche, as I've discussed before, and I don't know if he mentions the dynamic of a stage performer anywhere, but the Nietzsche that I know, now that I'm 90 pages into Nietzsche, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, I think he would say, don't do it. I think Nietzsche would just say, don't get on the stage altogether. He would say performance is indecent exposure. You're taking your most intimate, like the most personal part of you. You're taking your soul and you're sharing it with these strangers, these people who despise you, who you despise. That sounds like Nietzsche, doesn't it? So, reading Nietzsche has been a fascinating experience. It's like revisiting my adolescence. A lot of what he's saying. And it would have been very interesting to read this before reading The Fountainhead, because of the way that, like I've discussed previously, I think like The Fountainhead is like a project in which Ayn Rand discovers that her differences with Nietzsche. The way Nietzsche talks about friendship in this book, at least in the early part that I read, he says, you talking to yourself is all the friendship you need. Like you and yourself, that's two people when you talk to yourself. So having a second person there, a friend, that's like three, that's third wheel. Basically live in solitude, he says. That's Nietzsche's answer to a lot of dilemmas. The sort of lack of fruition that comes of friendship, go live in solitude. The gross dynamic that he identifies in the marketplace between a salesman and a potential customer, just walk away from it, says Nietzsche. Go live in solitude. And living in solitude is going to be challenging. He says, solitary man, you are going the way to yourself, and your way leads past yourself and your seven devils. You will be a heretic to yourself and a witch and a prophet and an evildoer and a villain. You must be ready to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you become new if you had not first become ashes? He goes on and on. Go apart and be alone with your love and your creating, my brother, and justice will be slow to limp after you. Go apart and be alone with my tears, my brother. I love him who wants to create beyond himself and thus perishes. Reading that actually got me wondering if Ayn Rand's choice to end We the Living with the death of the hero was sort of influenced by Nietzsche. And I know that the theme of We the Living was that you can't live under statism. You can't live under a totalitarian state. But still, I wonder, is there a little bit of that, like it's noble to die being the creator that you are, like to die being you? That's better than to live in any other fashion. Yes, spoiler alert, says Scott in the chat. Back to me and my thoughts. I found that whole thing very interesting. Like we finally get to kind of come sort of face to face with Leonard Peikoff. And we're not supposed to talk to him about the one thing that he's dedicated his life to, which affected us in so many ways. And then what is there to connect on beyond that? I guess just, like everyday stuff, I guess. Isn't that kind of an interesting dynamic? Something else that I thought about last week was Leonard Peikoff's haircut, his hairdo in the late 80s, I guess, maybe early 90s, the haircut commonly referred to as a mullet, kind of where it's long in the back. And I looked up, I researched online to see if there's any instance of Leonard Peikoff discussing that haircut. Like if anyone ever asked him about it on his podcast or anything like that. It's a very, I guess, contemporary haircut for the 80s. It's largely affiliated with rock and roll or heavy metal even. So it was definitely, like I said, contemporary. And it's so interesting that the sort of face of objectivism after Ayn Rand passed away would have that haircut. Somewhat related, I've been thinking about, like, what is the daily objective? Like, what does this show do exactly? And I think among other things, it's a showcasing of several opinionated people, like serious students of objectivism, trying to relate this philosophy to their very personal, concrete values, sometimes controversial values. And in a way, like all of us here on the show have our own mullet, if you want to look at it that way. Like we kind of bring our own sort of background, and we're in some ways, all of us are, and all of you watching in many ways are products of our time. We have certain values that come as a consequence of early life exposure to certain things, certain types of art or certain experiences, certain people, definitely certain personalities we've been around that affected our sense of life, right? Isn't that what sense of life is? I definitely don't like bringing up that phrase often because of how much I don't really understand, like, what exactly is meant by sense of life. But my current understanding of sense of life is it's when you're very young, very early, the way you respond to the things around you. That's kind of where your sense of life, I guess, begins. The way you respond to the things around you early on. And you can't get beneath that. You can't ask, well, how would I have responded if there were different circumstances? You just can't get beneath the actual concretes you were born around or that you grew up around. So yeah, in a way, we all kind of bring our own mullet. So there's a little metaphor I thought about and wanted to mention. I guess we'll read a couple super chats and get on with a couple more thoughts. Thank you, Marilyn, for the $4. Jonathan Honig. Who's this Jonathan Honig guy? He probably has a cool mullet. $1.99. Thank you for that. Marilyn with $5 says, if we're grateful to him, we should want him to have his birthday his way. I see a childlike love of life in him. Absolutely. He's a very sweet, based on what I've seen, very sweet person, right? That definitely comes off like the affectionate type. He does not come off as cold or made of stone or anything like that. And Rick with $9.99 says, you're a performer. What's it like when a stranger only interacts with you as your stage performance? It's awkward, I guess. But like I said, sometimes people try to overcompensate by being kind of fake and stuff like that. And, it's transparent. And I keep bringing up, I think women probably deal with this as they just go about life, whether or not they chose to be public figures. People approach them that had their eye on them or that have an interest in them. And sometimes we'll sort of go a step too far to make it come off like they're not interested. So I think the best thing to do in general is be interested in the person you're meeting, no matter who they are, whether it's a girl that you find attractive, whether it's a performer of any type that you have an interest in meeting. Just be actually interested in, like, who is this person, and be as kind of genuine as you can be, I guess. It doesn't mean you need to volunteer your most intimate details about yourself right when you meet somebody. It just means, like, be a genuine person, be someone who's, like, genuinely interested. That I think that's probably the best way to solve this unsolvable dilemma. Robert with $5 says, when I decided to become a celebrity, I knew it would take extra effort to stay connected to regular people, but I decided it's worth the effort. Well, thank you for that. All right. So let me take a sip of my cappuccino really quick. Um, Sorry for the camera angle, by the way. I wonder if there's like a bit too much headroom. It's just stuff you never see on television where someone just reaches over and adjusts the camera. I guess I'm not as tall as I remembered being. So a couple things I just wanted to mention from last week, and this might actually be a 20-minute show as this show was originally conceived. It was a 20-minute format and that sometimes would go a few minutes longer. Flash forward to today, it'll be like 35 minutes in and none of the hosts got enough off their chest. We keep on wanting to get a final word in. But today it might actually be like a 20-minute, 25-minute show and then 5 minutes of me going through notes at the end, and then an extra 5 minutes saying goodbye in the longest way possible today. All right. So we had Greg Salmieri on the show, and then the following day or a day or two later, I listened to Leonard Peikoff's Axioms in Induction. Is that what it was called? Leonard Peikoff Axioms Induction Act. Let me just make sure. The Axioms of Inductions, Part 1 and 2, which you got to see this stuff. You got to hear this stuff. It presumes that you've read Ayn Rand's book on epistemology. And it's also very helpful if you've read Leonard Peikoff's OPAR, Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. So if you're all caught up on that, Leonard Peikoff on induction. So specifically these two lectures, the Axioms of Induction Part 1 and then Part 2, it's fascinating to me. So I listened to it for the first time, last week. And he offers like a take on induction that I don't think we can call it the objectivist take on induction, because Ayn Rand, was, obviously had departed by the time Leonard Peikoff offers this, but he kind of takes the process of concept formation that Ayn Rand holds and applies it, I think, to causality. So like instances of causality, the first instances of causality are ostensive. You know it by just pointing to it, by observing it. And then you conceptualize it in a sense. You group it with other instances of causality, omitting their measurements and differentiating them from other types of causality. Go listen to it, please. Go listen to it. But I bring this up because at the end of Part 2, Leonard Peikoff says, hey, will Greg Salmieri please stand up? And then he praises Greg for a question he had asked him the previous year at a conference or at a lecture that completely reset the way Peikoff was looking at the issue of induction. And it completely kind of saved the way Peikoff was talking. Like it completely set him down the correct path to come up with this theory of induction. So this was like a movie scene or something like that. It was like a movie moment. Like Peikoff is like, Greg, please stand up. And he's praising him. It felt like it could be a movie, the man who saved science. So I would have obviously brought that up when Greg was on the show if I had heard that by then, but missed that opportunity. Another thing that came up last week was Don Watkins was here, and he mentioned that he had called in Leonard Peikoff's show and asked him, he said, there's a girl I'm friends with and I want to be more than friends, and she only wants to be friends. What should I do? And Leonard Peikoff asked him, do you think she really knows you? And Don said yes. And Peikoff said, then, it's not going to happen. I think this is one of those instances where the answer to a dilemma like that can be found most easily in just kind of conventional wisdom. I don't think you need to turn to a philosopher to ask something like that. I think you can basically just kind of look to, like I said, conventional wisdom. I think the way to look at a situation like that is that if you like a girl and she doesn't like you that way, accept that fact and move on. 99 times out of 100, that's the proper way to do it. There are instances where maybe if you hang around, she'll change her mind. But is that really how you want the relationship? It starts off with you with kind of a disparity, like an uneven ratio of passion. But I mean, a lot of these things are case by case. But I think in the vast majority of cases, if you were to ask me my opinion, I would say you like someone and she's not into you. She's not into you. Accept that fact and move on. And, you don't hang around them. So Don said, no, yes, I think she knows me. And Peikoff said, then it's not happening. But what if Don had said, no, I don't think she entirely knows me? then what is the advice going to be then? Like hang around her and hope she really gets to know you? That's like a cope. That's like something guys and girls do when they're rejected. They say, oh, I'll just hang around, and maybe when they see me from this angle, then they will get it. Then they will like me. But that's just not really how these things tend to go. So I think this is an opportunity to remember that philosophers have the most brilliant answers. A good philosopher, a great philosopher, has the most brilliant answers to life's deepest questions. But when it comes to very concrete problems, it's not necessarily a philosopher that's going to have the answer. I think Don, during that time, it must have been the late 90s or early 2000s, he could have called Loveline with the pragmatist Adam Carolla, the man allergic to books, the guy who does not probably really know what philosophy is, and gotten basically a spot-on answer, like the one I described. You know, you could almost hear it. You know, Adam Carolla, Don, yeah, you're 15. Yeah, so I like this girl at school, and she just wants to be friends. No, she's not into you, Don. But what if she gets to know me? No, she's not. Drew. Listen, Drew. Listen, Don. Is there another girl at school you like? Is there another girl at school you think is kind of cute? Yeah, there's. Okay, go talk to her. Maybe she's free this weekend. All right, Don. All right, Drew. He's a good kid. He'll land on his feet. Yep, that's true. Yeah. Yep. There's my Loveline impression, I guess. So that, I mean, there's this is a opportunity, I think, to remember that, like, sometimes you don't need the smartest person on earth to ask advice on an issue like that. Some things really, in some instances, like some cases where conventional wisdom is where to turn. So there's my opinion. There's how I would answer the question. If young Don, if young Don is listening through some time portal or something like that, maybe I'd be curious to ask Don how he would answer that question if someone asked him that. If a friend or his son, somebody were to someday ask Don what to do in that situation, if maybe his experience would bring up the same or different advice from the one he received. All right, we've covered some of my thoughts from last week. If you have any other thoughts, I don't see any other super chats, so I guess we can move on to Clubhouse. Thank you all for joining us today. We've got later today at 8:30 UK time an essay discussion with James Valiant, the essay being Collectivized Ethics. There you go. Looking forward to that. I guess we'll jump over to Clubhouse now. And I've heard, it's brought to my attention that I got a shout out on an upcoming episode of Joe Rogan. That's nice. I guess I'll listen to that exclusively on Spotify. No thanks. All right, everybody. That's enough riffing for me. This is maybe one of the shortest episodes ever, but Robert in the regular chat, not the super chat, basically the place where, I'm not going to insult Robert after he actually did in super chat. He says, easy, just listen to Tom Lycus's advice, then do the opposite. Tom Lycus is also an interesting phenomenon, very vulgar, materialistic, and speaks the language of selfishness. I mean, we could do an entire episode on Tom Lycus. He was a 90s jock as well. At one point on the same radio station as Adam Carolla, later on after Loveline, or maybe during Loveline. I don't actually know what station Loveline was on. I digress. Yeah, Loveline was on K-Rock, and then Lycus and Carolla, the morning show, were on 97.1 Free Talk, I think it was called, after Howard Stern left. But yeah, Tom Lycus speaks the language of selfishness. So beware. Let me hold up my Nietzsche book again. Beware people who speak the language of selfishness, but they're not rational. Beware people who tell you to look out for yourself and live a good life and live the good life, but they're not entirely advocating for being a rationally selfish person, because what they're going to advise you to do will often be hedonistic, materialistic, and you'll end up looking like Tom Lycus. I mean, Google image that guy and tell me if that's who you want to be. Robert says Lycus versus Corolla. Yes. Yeah. Or even better, Lycus versus Ayn Rand. Anyone versus Ayn Rand. I think she offers egoism that is superior. Obviously, I think we all agree on that. Look, back to the whole mullet thing and the chosen values. There's a lot we all disagree on. Obviously, a lot of us, we bring different contexts, different values. The one thing we all agree on is that Donald Trump is the worst thing ever. That's all the time we have today. Thank you all.